if your greatest asset as a podcast guest wasn't your credentials or your case studies or even your expertise? What if it's your intuition? In this episode of the Podcast Interview Marketing Show, I sit down with Samantha Hartley. Now, Samantha is a brilliant business coach, and she's a writer of one of my favorite newsletters. I read it in its entirety every time it hits my email. Now, a recent topic really struck me. She reminded me that in this AI-driven world, our most irreplaceable skill isn't how fast we can generate ideas, but how deeply we can sense the right ones. Samantha and I explore the power of intuition. In a world obsessed with data, we talk about things like precognition, gut instinct, and why sometimes it feels like a no, even when everything in the data says yes. She also lays out a compelling case for why consultants, coaches, professional services still matter, not despite of AI, but because of it. If you're wondering how to stay relevant, how to stand out, and truly serve at the highest level in this new era, this conversation is a must listen. Because in this age of AI, human insights, that's your unfair advantage. So let's dive in. I recently got an email. It's a newsletter that I love, and it changed the way I looked at professional services consultants and especially AI. Samantha Hartley talked about intuition, not just AI. Samantha, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Tom.
Can you unpack that a little bit more? What the whole concept is that you were trying to explain there?
Well, it's a big idea, and it's one that I've been thinking about a lot for really since forever, but since the beginning of the new year. And the more we dive into AI, the more I notice there are differences between what AI can do for us and what people can do for us. And are we just going to scrap everything and have, we don't need customer service people anymore. We don't need any of this kind of stuff because we have AI and we can teach it to be human. And so I'm really curious about what the limit of that is. In some of my circles, people are having conversations about, is it sentient? Does it have consciousness? And I think we have to define a lot of terms to get into that kind of stuff, but is it alive? And what does it mean to be alive? And what is consciousness? And I think those are interesting questions that, we could spend a whole many hours talking about. But in this situation, what is the AI conscious, or is it sentient, or is it human? And we can program it to imitate those things, but we're going to hit a limit of it. And, since I'm a business coach, I'm most interested immediately in, well, is AI going to come and take everyone's jobs? Are consultants going to be irrelevant anymore? Well, I think there are certain things that the AI isn't doing right now. And I think there are things that it'll never, ever be able to do. So the example that I wrote about in my newsletter was these intuitive moments that you have. And there's all kinds of them. But when I was home for the spring, it was the Friday before we were supposed to leave and return. We go away for the winter. And I was about to come back here. We'd stayed really long. It was the day before we were supposed to return. And at 4:20 p.m. on Friday, we were returning on Saturday, a large tow truck carrying an industrial auger came around a corner and didn't stick the corner, clipped my car and gouged the entire left side of the car from toe to tip, basically. Events unfolded from there. Lots of things, logistics, basically a 2-month process of trying to return our lives to normal. Interestingly, maybe the next day, I looked in my notes app. And in my notes app, what I do every morning is I write down the dream I've had. If I've had a significant dream, and sometimes you don't remember dreams and sometimes you do. That morning in my dream, in one of the many scenes, I was staying at the home of a famous person, and I walked out in the front yard, and the famous person was coming around the corner and in a vehicle, And I looked over and I saw my cat and another cat on like a little piece of sidewalk grass. And I was thinking that this person in the car, now it's probably important to say that this person is in the dream equivalent of a very large industrial tow truck. So does something come to mind? It's a Cybertruck. The person in my dream is driving a Cybertruck. And he comes around the corner. It's going the opposite direction than the car that hit me, but he's turning away from me. And under the vehicle, I can see that my cat is safe. My cat and his buddy are safe. Even though it looked like they were going to be run over by this Cybertruck, it kind of clears them and goes away. So that had happened 12 hours before my car accident. But you can see that there's a parallel situation. In science, they call that precognition, which is having an awareness or a knowing about something before it happens. Now, in this situation, it wasn't a strong enough precognition for me to maybe think, oh, I might have a car accident today, so perhaps I shouldn't drive the car at all, or to take any action differently. And in fact, I wasn't even aware of my quote unquote precognition until after it had happened. But it is the kind of thing that makes me think, oh, some part of me on some level knew that exact situation was going to happen. So I may have lost some of your listeners already, and they would say, well, it's completely coincidental. But I've never had another dream about a car turning a corner and almost running over my cats. So, it's a unique experience.
And I love that because like AI can give us facts and figures, but it doesn't have that intuition that people have. And would you consider precognition similar to intuition, right? When you're a consultant and you've got this gut feeling that this is the problem, or this is the way we're going, or things like that there's no data to support it, but you believe that this is where it is.
That happens all the time in these gut decisions that business owners are making. They just get a feeling about something that they should do. And we can talk about that on strategy level, but I think it comes up most often on person to person level. There are many times that I'm consulting with a client and she will explain to me, here are some things that are happening in the business and here's something that's going to go on. And let's talk about growth and strategies and things like that. And I'll have a feeling and I will ask, it sounds like you're not completely excited about these next steps. And then it will turn out, it's too much pressure. I don't want to do this. I'm not sold on this idea or something like that. In interviewing candidates to work in companies, they can do interviews there's even lie detector tests and things that are put in place to see for background checks. And you can ask several questions in certain ways in order to kind of like suss out any lies. You can do that with technology to see if someone is lying about what they want to do. But what I would say is it's very hard to program something if you're convincingly saying all the right things. And if I'm coming to work, I mean, how many times have we heard, well, he just came to work all the time and everyone thought everything was fine. And then suddenly he quit, he left, a bad thing happened, something like that. Or, well, it seemed to be the perfect marriage and then suddenly they weren't. We think we understand human behavior. But if you're just looking at like the technical data of human behavior, you're going to miss all of the things that we intuit. Have you ever been standing somewhere and felt someone looking at you?
Yeah.
And you looked over and you noticed, oh, that person's kind of like staring at me. It happens all the time in cars when you pull up. Do you think an AI can do that?
Yeah, it's not intelligence. It's not experience. It's got to be something else. And it's when you said sentient, right? What is sentient? Is that the ability to feel, or is that intuition? And I think as you were talking about that, I could think of, I'm a big fan of Notebook LM, right? And I can put a book in there and give me the 30-minute podcast that explains the book. Okay. Full transparency. A lot of times when we have a prospect and I'm like, hey, can you share your book with me so I can get a sense what it is? Well, I can't read the book for 5 hours, but I can listen to a 30-minute podcast. And, it's technically right, but it's boring and there's nothing that surprises me in there. So it's like, it's not wrong, but it's not human.
It isn't human because it hasn't got however long humans have been on the planet. What it hasn't developed is that we are biologically programmed in our DNA to anticipate a negative thing happening because you can be standing somewhere and be like, I don't know, I have a weird feeling, and then want to move away from that place. And then you find out like, well, there was a tiger that was about to jump on you and eat you. So this whole tiger example that people are constantly using of like, well, then there was a tiger behind you, or then a tiger ate them. There are more years that we spent getting eaten by tigers and similar things than the, relative 200 years that we haven't been eaten, or 2,000 years that we aren't being eaten by them. So there's so much more of this, lizard brain, reptilian brain programming that is just intended to keep us alive. And one of my concerns with AI is that the more people, and I'm talking about intelligent business people that I know who are using AI, the incredibly rapid decline of our critical thinking abilities happens, because the brain is trained over all of these millions of years to do the least possible thing that is necessary to keep us alive and thriving, right? So it really wants to go to less stuff. And so the more we're outsourcing, would you just like write that thing for me? The more we lose. And this is a thing I notice about myself when I'm using it. The more we lose the ability to push through the discomfort of the first draft, or polishing this version, or coming up with the strategies that we need to do. Like, I don't really want to write the whole marketing plan. Why don't I just have ChatGPT do that for me? And then you get a thing and you think, it's probably as good as what I would have done. But you didn't have to do the mental exertion to do that. And then I think over time, what we're going to see is that critical thinking skills decline. We already know many other skills are declining, attention spans and things like that. But I think we're going to see a lot of just the ability to think innovatively, to stick with the thing when it's hard. I think that's going to go away as well.
Yeah, I was talking with Dr. Chris Draper, and he calls it spew rate. And I'm like, what is spew rate? And I wrote it down. It's the rate at which AI can produce deceptively acceptable outputs greatly exceeds the human capabilities to see it. And it's like, it's not wrong, but we can't see that it's not right. And that's one of those things where that's the difference. That's why you hire a consultant, because they've got the feeling, they've seen it. They can spot the deceptively wrong.
Right. Well, the first thing is, how dangerous is deceptively wrong? And is it merely deceptively wrong? Because there's plenty of AI that we know, the hallucination factor is real. So there's plenty of times that it's just completely outright wrong. And you do need an expert who is skilled enough and expert enough to be able to look at just basic information and be like, well, that's just incorrect. Let's go through and fact check all the pieces in here, because these things are completely incorrect. If you've done like math calculations, there are so many times that something consequential has been incredibly incorrect. And as we know, as sophisticated that the AI is getting, there are still things like, apparently I was just reading the Washington Post article about testing AI. And one of the questions that it couldn't answer was, how many buttons are there on an iPhone? So it's a lot like being, having an IQ of 200, but the social skills of a 7-year-old. You just need to have a lived experience, and it won't have a lived experience. It's never going to have a lived experience. So even when once you implant it into, some sort of a humanoid figure, it can go out and see things, but it's still never going to have a human experience. And what does that human experience bring us? It brings us the discernment to double check all of these things. And yes, you can have your AIs check each other. I do that all the time. But there's still that discernment piece that you're talking about. And I keep coming back to this. There's the feeling that you get when you're looking at a company culture, or when you're talking strategy with a board. Can you feel what's happening in the room in terms of interpersonal dynamics, in terms of, things that we would call soft skills? But I would also say a lot of these are hard skills like strategy, anticipating things that might happen and things like that. So it's really knowing human nature. And at least right now, I don't think it does at all.
Don't you think that's, if I can just ask a question of how do you do this, or what are the 5 steps to do this? That's a question for ChatGPT. But if it's the why, or what do you think will happen, that's where humans and consultants bring value. And I think about it sometimes. I'll listen to a podcast interview and say, that should have been a blog. Or why was a human wasting their time? That's a ChatGPT. But it's like, nobody wants to know the obvious information anymore. I can search that. Give me something that's non-obvious that makes me think differently.
Insights, discernment. I think as a tool, what it does incredibly well is synthesis. But I also know people who do synthesis incredibly well. And what they're able to bring to their synthesis might not be as great as ChatGPT. I also read an article where they were asking GPTs to read books and then talk about what they felt the point of the book was. And there were a lot of misses on that. But when it got to like the theme or something like that, one of the authors said, "Oh, I definitely this is incredible. I really feel like the AI is like expressed an understanding of what the theme of the book was." But you'll hear that is still an intellectual synthesis or diagnosis. It's still not like speaking from a lived experience of like, here's why I was moved, or here's why I can imagine that people would be moved by this. Some of these things are going to be able to be programmed into AI. And that's why I think that we have a window, 3 to 5 year window, maybe, for consultants to stay on the front edge, the leading edge of what's going on with AI, so that they can say, let me tell you what it'll do for you, but also what it's not going to be able to do.
Yeah. And it's interesting because there was a study that came out and said 95% of projects didn't turn out to be profitable or something like that with AI. And it's like better to have a consultant to come in at the beginning and say, it's not there yet. Right? You cannot do it. That will not do it. Maybe 3 to 5 years, but here's what it can do. Right? And it's not the silver bullet. And I think even on podcast interview, it's the same thing, right? Of giving insights and your opinions on things, not just trying to compete with AI that you can regurgitate information quicker.
Right. And knowing the actual limit of that, like being able to say that it's going to be regurgitation as opposed to something else. I think in the rush to not get left behind, like we see all of this, like these bidding wars to hire the best people and to develop the things, and where the technology, we know already that the technology is way, way ahead of guardrails like ethics, many legal things that are happening. It's just, it's out of control of any of those kinds of things right now. But I think it's also the effort to not get left behind or to be first with things is causing people to overinvest in it and to do things so speedily, like run fast, break things, instead of saying, let's then maybe take like a more thoughtful approach to this, a slower, more intentional approach, and just make sure that what we're doing isn't harmful, isn't just outright crazy. But there's going to be somebody who's running ahead. And so I get why, from a business standpoint, these business leaders are thinking that they need to rush. But again, this is the gap that can be filled by consultants and advisors. A lot of that money is going to be like, I think those are multi-billion-dollar and possibly trillion-dollar mistakes they're making by just dumping money in something that like a slower, more thoughtful approach can help do. It's kind of like when DeepMind came out and they were like, yeah, we just developed this like on a shoestring in the, with just some smart people coming together, and we didn't have to dump billions into it. And everybody on this side was like, what? That could be done.
I see all the movies now from the .com boom and bust, right? That are 25 years later. It's like, wow, I wonder what they're going to be saying 25 years from now. It's why didn't we see that coming? But I've noticed even in your newsletter, which again is my favorite one to read, is that it's gone from how to do this, which was always helpful, but now it's like insightful of like, oh, I never thought about that, right? And sometimes it's the questions that you can bring up with a client on a podcast interview, whatever it is. Those are more powerful than the answers to the questions they already have.
Thank you. I think that's also how you get good information out of the AI, is asking the right questions and asking thoughtful questions. And I've spent, like I'm sure many of your listeners, I've spent many hours sitting and having just extremely frustrating conversations where I will all caps yell at it for being stupid. But I've also had incredibly rich and meaningful conversations doing, life coaching type things, talking through something the way I would maybe with a journal, not things that I think people are having GPT substitute for a therapist. And I think there are, pros and cons about that. But a lot of times I think if you had an interactive journal where you could express things, and then I will say, tell back to me what I said. And so that synthesis where it's able to read things back, I think is super helpful. And then, what are some questions I'll say that I can keep in mind that will help me work on these things that I've brought up. And so to me, it is a lot about the right questions that help us, because it's prompting you beyond what you already know. And that's what really good questions do.
And it reminded me, I think it's Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe. I don't know if you ever remember that. There was like they asked the supercomputer, what's the meaning of life or something? And it came back with the answer 47, and then it blew up. Right. And it's like, oh, I guess we should have asked a better question, right? It's not necessarily the answer, but what's the question you're asking?
Right. I think it's 42, but yes.
All right. Well, see, I didn't even get that part right.
It still proves your point.
Yeah. So how are you thinking of you bring most value to your audience when you're here on a podcast, when you're writing your newsletter? How has that changed now with AI?
Well, I think one of the things that I use AI for is I don't have it write the things for me. I will write something and then I will say, what are the top 3 ways I could make this more clear, or give me ideas like an editor? Because what I'm looking for is to make sure that I'm concise, clear, that it's readable online, without moving all the way into kind of like LinkedIn broetry land, which is a bothersome trend, but is an easy way to skim a lot of text. So instead of having to do a lot of that kind of thing yourself, Grammarly, by the way, is an AI. So for people who are like, I'm not using any of those things, well, Grammarly is an incredibly helpful AI that can show you like, this isn't clear. This could read better. Your tone could be different. And then there's things like the Hemingway app that'll show you how to make your writing more clear. So I do think for me, a lot of it is how do you express your ideas more clearly? In general, I'm like, what do I want to think about that is, for a lot of people who've been in marketing and business for a really long time, after a while, marketing and business, and the interesting ideas are coming to you from neuroscience or from, this spirituality or other realms, fiction, film, those kinds of creative areas. So those are the things that I'm looking at, is like, what are the creative initiatives that I'm doing that have nothing to do with business that are helping me come up with new ideas or think in new ways or communicate more effectively. So those are the things that I'm looking at.
It's interesting. It's like there's still that connection of things, the non-obvious thinking. We had one of our clients said that a viral podcast is not how many downloads it gets, but how many questions it spurs. And does somebody take it and think, oh, I just read that newsletter and now I'm thinking about it. I'm talking about it. That's where you really get reach there.
Totally. Well, and I mean, I hope that people would say, oh, I completely disagree, and here is why. I'm not interested in, I completely disagree, and this is stupid, and I toss it to the side. That's fine. As you said, people will either, what is it, turn it up or turn it off.
Exactly. Magnetic marketing.
Right. So for me, I want to hear, oh, I agree with you, but not here. Or I see this application over here. Or have you ever considered? Like, those are the things I'm really interested in. And it's, a lot of those extraneous realms are starting to come in because AI does bring up those questions for us of like, well, is AI putting people out of work? Who is it putting out of work? What obligation do we have as a society to take care of people who are put out of work, if any? What all of these profits as they go up into knowledge work, and what are the possibly the bad things that could happen from that? So those to me are social questions, societal questions, moral questions. Those are all important. What does work even mean anymore? I feel like we had as a country, the US and possibly the world, but I saw it here, that the US had kind of a reckoning with what work means during the pandemic, because we had all these distinctions between essential workers and well, if you could work from home. And then a lot of people got perspective when you're home all the time. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Am I more productive at home? Am I less productive at home? What about that 2.5-hour commute? So I loved the reimagining of work that happened during the pandemic. And I think we're in a place right now where we're reimagining work and what it means to be a knowledge worker, what it means to be like, how can I add value? And if I were looking, like, there are entire professions that are being eliminated by AI, LLMs, basically ChatGPT and Claude and those. CPAs, a lot of writing professions, paralegals, a lot of those professions are like kind of going away. So if I, as a business coach, am thinking, well, I think my profession is going to be greatly reduced in numbers because you're not going to be able to be somebody who's just saying the same things as an LLM anymore. It's not going to that's not going to get you or keep you clients. Then how does our profession need to evolve in order to not get completely eliminated? Or should I just go start an organic farm and forget about the whole thing?
Yeah. And those are interesting questions and discussions that have to be thought through. It's not like you can go back and say, based on all the experience and what you have in your training, what's the answer to this? No, they have a hard time projecting on that. So yeah, it's like, there's interesting discussions and stupid discussions. And the interesting discussions are where there's not a great answer that everybody can know, right? We don't need to have a discussion on how to spell a word.
Or how many buttons are on an iPhone.
Right, exactly.
How have you seen intuition, or how do you experience using your intuition in your business?
I never really thought about that until you brought that up. And often I think we have the intuition and then we look for the data to support the intuition. So if I have an intuition of this is where I should go with my marketing, and I ask ChatGPT, does my question influence that? Right. And if somebody else came at from a different viewpoint, would theirs change that answer? And especially with, ChatGPT 5 is not as bad, but it was more sycophant, right? Oh yeah, that's great. That's right. Whereas, I use that intuition and I still bounce it off people because, your friends and family, they want you to be happy. So they'll just agree with you. It's those rare people that will tell you, that's a stupid idea. Have you thought of this and there? Because they want you to be better. And so that's once you started to talk about intuition, it's like, am I using the data and AI to support my intuition with the questions I ask?
Well, a good example would be that I think all your listeners can identify with is something like if you have a discovery call or an intake with a potential client and they match all of the criteria on paper, but you just have you just have a feeling. Is that a gut feeling or an instinct? Now, to your point, what a lot of people will do, especially if they are low on cash, is they will have all of these left brain justifications why, hey, I'm probably being silly and this is a whatever. But I think as we mature as business owners, the more we say, I don't know what it was, looks great on paper. If it's a yellow flag as opposed to a red flag, then I will get curious and ask more questions. But if I have a red flag feeling about somebody and I'm like, not my client, I will immediately find a way to refer them to someone else. So I think that's the piece that I want your listeners to be thinking about.
That is so interesting because, okay, behind the curtain here, all of our discovery calls, right? We record those and we look at those for themes that are coming up, areas that are questions that we can address. But one of them that we do in there is based on our ideal client profile and what we've put in for who we get the best results for. How do they score 1 out of 100? Because one of our core values is hell yes or no, right? If we look at a client and say, maybe we can get them results, maybes never work, right? So we want to be able to tell them hell yes or no. And there are times where the score is like 92 for a fit. And there'll be something on there where it's like, I don't see it. Right. And I will always give it to one of our operating officer, the chief operating officer, and say, hey, what do you think of this? And see if they get the same red flag, because I don't want my personal discrimination to come in and do that. But sometimes there's just that gut feeling and the intuition. It's like, no, this isn't a fit, right? On the check marks, they hit everything. But it's just like, no, there's something there that this isn't a hell yes.
And the way I'll teach it to my clients is that I have had my 3 worst clients ever. And what I find is when you interview someone, I'm like, who do they remind you of? If you were thinking of in your past friends, other people, who did that person remind you of? And if they say something like my most hated gym teacher in 8th grade, or that nightmare client from 3 years ago who did blah, 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 I'm like, there's your answer. So, and I'll kind of describe it as like, it's almost kind of like smells like, there's just something ineffable. Ineffable is a sign of intuition, instincts, that gut feeling, like however we want to call it, that I think is the thing that we're talking about. Now, if you went into ChatGPT and you just said, listen, I'm low on cash. I had an intake with a client and scored 92 on our form, but I'm just having that'd be a good opportunity to talk through. And what the LLM will help you do is, probably, I think in the best case scenario, express your thoughts, tell them back to you so that you have a realization about your own information. Like that's what a good life coach would do. That's what a good LLM will do, and what a friend would do. In what I don't always know is whether we will, in a moment of need, say, I'll go ahead and work with them anyway. And just like, what's the worst thing could happen? And then you can just extrapolate that to almost any business situation. Should I invest in this? Should we move forward in this direction or whatever?
And I was thinking of from the listener's standpoint too, right? So listeners are listening to somebody, and do they get that gut feel too of, oh, I'd like to work with this person, or I don't, right? They could be the best provider of a service, but if there's something about them that is like fingernails on a chalkboard, right? If you don't like the way I drop my G's because you had a bad experience with somebody from Chicago that used to drop their G's on ing words, well, then we're probably not going to work well together, right? And so that thing of how can you make it so that, so clear that people can use their intuition too to either attract to you or repel to you. And it's either one's not bad. It's not they're discriminating against you. It's just they can feel, no, this isn't going to work.
Not a fit. There's something about this that's not a fit. That's what I always try to take the judgment language out of it. I'll say perfect client. It's not that they're perfect as a person, but exactly what they need is exactly what you do. And that's the level that I'm looking for. What I would say is the more mature you get in life or in business, the more experienced you are, the more opportunities you're going to have, that it's not going to be pass fail. It's going to be really, really nuanced. You get to graduate school level of intuition challenges. And what I would say is it's just the tiniest little whisper. And when you make the wrong decision, even though you like on some level you knew better, then I find you really get punished. But not to be punitive about it, but I have been really punished when I've been like, I don't know, like let's sure how bad could it be, and then I go for it, and it's like, oh no, that was never good. But it is like the book Blink by Malcolm Gladwell, which is all about how all of what we know in an instant. So shown 7 seconds of video of a couple not doing well. The viewers can tell, in this case, I think it might have been the Gottmans, the famous couple who were relationship counselors or relationship therapists. They could tell within 7 seconds whether a couple would make it or not. Doctors, people could tell whether doctors were going to get sued for malpractice with just a few seconds of watching them in action. And I think just in general in life, like I'll always say, like, what was your very, very first impression of them? That's the thing to look at.
Interesting. Yeah. And you wonder if that same thing is sort of in marketing, right? And they turn you off. That's fine. Saves their time and your time. You don't need more leads like you teach, right? You're not optimizing for more clients. You're optimizing for better clients that value what you do.
Yeah. Yeah. Deeper relationships with fewer clients.
Well, Samantha, what's ordinary to you is amazing to others. Thank you so much. And how can people find out about you and especially sign up for your newsletter? Because I know I haven't been forwarding it on to everyone. So let them sign up for it.
Thank you so much for being an evangelist for my newsletter. I appreciate that, Tom. I'm at SamanthaHartley.com. There are many places there you can sign up for the newsletter. But if you go to 6 Figure Clients, 6 with the numeral 6, figureclients.com, you can also get my definitive guide to signing 6-figure clients.
Thank you, Samantha.
It's been wonderful to talk to you. And thank you for being interested in topics like this.
So how do we compete with AI? Here's the truth. We don't, and you shouldn't try. Instead, let's bring what the machines can't. And as Samantha Hartley reminded us today, that's intuition, discernment, insights, and the ability to share what isn't in the data. In this conversation, Samantha shared how you can remain indispensable. And it's not by outcalculating AI, but by outfeeling it. Whether it's that subtle red flag in a call, a shift in team dynamics during a meeting, or that whisper that there's a better path forward. That's the kind of knowing that you can't get in from an algorithm. She also made a powerful point. As we lean more on AI for quick answers, we risk outsourcing our ability to think critically. You see, the future belongs to those who stay thoughtful, curious, and yes, intuitive. If you found this episode thought-provoking, I highly encourage you to go over and sign up for Samantha's newsletter at SamanthaHartley.com or grab her definitive guide over at 6figureclients.com. And if this conversation sparked new ideas or questions, please share them. That's how we grow. Because podcast interviews aren't just about information. They're about transformation. Until next time, remember, when you're on a podcast, you're not only talking to your ideal clients, you're talking to the AI that refers them.